Okay, welcome back, class. We are looking at the biological basis. This is the third series in the brain section of our notes. Most of the information that you will be reading or that you can read is found on page 71 to 73. I would take my notes in the note packet on page 10. If there's ever any notes on the screen that's not a big idea, that's not in your note packet, I would highly suggest that maybe you write it down in the margin or take out a separate sheet of paper and write it down. So we discussed in the last brain series that there are different regions of the brain that we're going to spend some time looking at. The red area of the brain is the hindbrain. You should remember from the last series we talked about the brainstem, the pons, the medulla, the reticular formation, and the cerebellum, all of which are part of the hindbrain, the innermost area of the brain which controls our survival functions. The midbrain we're going to talk about in class, but this is the area of the brain that is responsible for sensory input and processes our memories. All right, and then moving on, this section of the video is going to specifically talk about the forebrain in the limbic systems branch. The limbic system is responsible for things like emotion, hunger, and memory. The hindbrain is responsible for our survival functions. The forebrain is now kind of a layer on top of that deals with the emotions, hunger, and memory. And then the next series, which we'll talk about after this, looks at the cerebrum or the cortex, which is the most sophisticated system of thinking. So the limbic system, a part of the forebrain, the layers of the limbic system not only process memories and regulate emotion, it also is involved in feelings of pleasure, pain, fear, and rage. It expands, like I said before, on the more basic functions of the brainstem. So this is going to look at maybe why you're angry or why maybe you fall in love. The thalamus. The thalamus is a funny structure because sometimes in some textbooks I've seen it in the hindbrain. In other textbooks I've seen it in the limbic system. Okay, the thalamus, which you could see here, is on the top portion of the brainstem. So some people consider it part of the brainstem. Some people consider it's not a part of the brainstem. The thing I want you to know is where it's located. I want you to know that it's located on top of the brainstem. The function, all sensory information except for smell, is routed through the thalamus. So let's say I cut my finger, and the sensory neurons are going to bring that information up to my brain, up my spinal cord. The first place it's going to go is it's going to go to the thalamus. This is kind of like the switchboard that then helps process where the different information needs to go. Okay, smell is believed as an older sense, and it's processed in the olfactory cortex. All right, thalamus is also known as the sensory switchboard. The location is at the top of the brainstem. The hypothalamus, okay, part of the limbic system. The hypothalamus specifically regulates body temperature, fluids, nutrients. It sends information to the pituitary gland. So we talked about, as you can see, it's right on top of here, the thalamus. We talked about last week the endocrine system and how the endocrine system has the hypothalamus as a part of its system. So the hypothalamus is responsible for telling those functions of the endocrine system you need to send hormones in order for growth. So the hypothalamus is also part of that endocrine system. Okay. It's located just below the thalamus there. And a big thing that it controls is hunger and thirst. And it also influences your sexual drive. Okay. Its functions is to analyze the blood flow in your body. So when it detects an imbalance, okay, it tells the body to respond. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I'm thirsty. Oh, my body needs something, or it's craving something. The hippocampus. Okay, one of the two most important parts of the limbic system is the hippocampus. Technically, there are two hippocampi, and their job is to connect your brain with your past memories. So the hippocampi, the big function here is memory. we're going to talk about in class, here's the limbic system. Okay, all the different parts of the limbic system. Here's your hippocampi right here. Okay, on the other side, there's the hippocampi. What we're going to learn is the brain, you can kind of see it here, gets split in half. There's a right side of the brain and a left side. So that would essentially make that there's two hippocampi. Both interact with memory. Okay? It's located in the center of the brain. Specifically, I would know that it's located in the limbic system. The amygdala. The amygdala, you can see it's at the top of the hippocampus here. Linked to emotion, aggression, and fear. Like the hippocampi, the amygdala's job is it relates memory and emotion. So if I were really angry, my amygdala would be very active, and they might be able to identify that with a PET scan. It also seems to play the largest role in dealing with your feelings of pleasure, okay, happiness. It is two small lima beans on the hippocampus. So we talked about before, here's the hippocampi, and here's another hippocampi. Here's the two portions of the amygdala. And you could see here was where the brain kind of splits down the center. And all of this stuff we're going to talk about in the next video is the cerebral cortex, the higher level of thinking. Key facts: in 1939, your book talks about a monkey. They wanted to figure out how the different structures impact your behavior, so they did do some testing with animals. They were giving shock therapy or shock treatments to different monkeys and destroying the amygdala in monkeys. And what they found was when the monkeys had these destroyed, they were either showing no sense of emotion, okay, a lot of the times they were showing no sense of emotion because they didn't have it anymore, or if they did other types of shock treatments, they would get really angry or aggressive. The pituitary gland is a gland within the limbic system. You should be familiar with this. It's in the endocrine system. It's responsible for growth, your growth hormones. It receives information from the hypothalamus and sends it to the hormones to other glands. It's a small bean structure at the bottom of the brain. Okay, and it is known as the master gland in the endocrine system. And then the last one, the corpus callosum. I think it's a good part to consider this as a part of the limbic system. I know some people consider it a part of the cortex, but it actually does the job for the cortex. Okay, it sends information. If we were to split this in half, the corpus callosum sends information from the right hemisphere to the left hemisphere. So because you have two hemispheres of the cerebral cortex, this is the little part that sends, it's like the highway that connects the two. Sends messages between the two hemispheres, connects the two brain hemispheres. Okay, so let's review real quick the limbic system, which is a part of the forebrain that sits on top of the brainstem. Okay, and the different functions we learned about in the limbic system are what you're responsible for knowing in class. The thalamus is the sensory switchboard. The hypothalamus controls hunger and thirst. Hippocampus helps with memory. Pituitary helps with growth. The amygdala, arousal and anger. And then corpus callosum helps communicate the right and left hemisphere. See you in class.